Justice Sotomayor,
Wow.
welcome back to Princeton.
I never imagined a moment like this when I was here. I hope all of you will experience it someday.
Well, we are so happy you are experiencing it right now. I guess I should say, if Vice President Calhoun hasn't explained this musical equipment, it's not because the Justice and I are planning to perform for you later on. We have Jazz Fest coming up, and so we have to be set up for that. But
Jazz Fest?
Jazz Fest.
Wow.
Yeah, that wouldn't have happened when you were a student.
No, never happened.
So I want to welcome you back and thank you for allowing us to name Sonia Sotomayor Hall in your honor. So you've come back here many times since joining the court. What goes through your mind when you return to campus? What are the big changes or differences that you see at Princeton today?
Physically, it's a totally different campus. The campus was this main area. It went down to Dillon Hall. There was a tennis court behind it. And then there was nothing. Until you it felt like walking a mile to the parking lot. That space is all filled with new buildings. I used to work at the computer center, which was at the end of Prospect Avenue Street. And it was the first major intersection, was the Third World Center. Across the street was the computer center. And the computer center in front of it was Stevenson Hall. And Stevenson Hall was the spot for Jewish students to eat. And because I worked at the computer center, I would eat often at Stevenson Hall. And that was the first place I went in and asked for milk with dinner. And the student serving me said, "We keep kosher." You learn lessons even as a New Yorker. At any rate, now, and there was, I think, what was the private eating club? Was it Cottage or something like that?
That was one of them.
One of them on Washington Road. But Washington,
on
the
Washington
campus
Road,
ended
that was
there.
Terrace, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it ended right there. You now go down to the boathouse with new buildings. The physical plant has changed dramatically. But what has also changed is the composition both of the administration, of the administration, the faculty, and students. I was the third year of women. A room where half the audience of students is women would have never happened. I was the only woman in many classes. So the fact that we're such a diverse student body now, of all kinds, of all backgrounds, is such a dramatic difference from when I was here. This was still an old boys' playground. And that has thankfully changed so much. The fact that you have a music department that is actually world-renowned now, that's brand new. But that your administrators are so diverse, a woman provost would have never happened back then. The only woman dean was a dean of students. Now you have them running departments. Only Nancy Macchio, who was Nancy Weiss back then, was the head of the history department, but I don't think there was another woman who was the head of a department. These changes are not just symbolic, although the symbolism is so important. There's something more fundamental that has happened here. The place has grown. It's developed and it's grown into a multicultural, multidimensional institution. And so when I come back, it's with pleasure and real joy to see the changes. Although I have to say, I used to ride my bicycle everywhere. I guess I would get tired now going to some of the buildings you have to reach.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you recognize the way we have growing more diverse, and so evident looking out at this wonderful student body. We've become more diverse, and we've become better and more excellent as a result of that diversity. So thank you for helping to get it started. You and I both have jobs where our institutional roles limit what it is that we can say, you more so than me, and given that, and there may be all sorts of questions in people's minds as we get started here that they would love to have me ask you and that I can't, I thought I would ask you to say a little bit about how you think about the guidelines and parameters for conversations like this one.
I obviously have studied many areas of the law intimately. I have opinions about many areas of the law. But I do believe that when people come into the courtroom, that they want to believe and should believe that I am keeping an open mind until I've read everything they've given me to read and I've heard their lawyers argue, and that I've even heard my colleagues' votes. To be able to do that, I have a very, very passionate belief that I should not be opining on issues that are before the court. That I may have in the past spoken about them when they weren't issues before us, but that people should know that I am keeping an open mind. And so I don't talk about cases that are before the court or likely to come before the court. I also, the Code of Judicial Ethics commends me to avoid commenting on political issues. And so I stay away from that as well. It doesn't mean that I don't talk more generally, but I'm very cautious about staying out of political debate. For that same reason that I don't think people should be guided about how I feel about something. When a younger person asks me about a political issue, I look at them and I say, why is my opinion important? What's your opinion? And why? And you should be asking yourself that question. If you want to ask me the question, then you haven't gone out to learn enough about the issue you're asking me about. Because it should be your opinion that matters. So anyway, those are the things I stay away from. But there leaves a lot to ask me.
So with that in mind, I'm gonna pivot to some questions and try to weave in here some questions we received in advance from some of the students who are with us here in the audience. Let me begin with this. As Vice President Calhoun's introduction illustrates, you've lived this really amazing life in the law: prosecutor, solo practitioner, commercial litigator, district court judge, circuit court judge, and now Supreme Court justice. And that observation leads to the two questions that relate to one another. One from Leah Reddy of the class of 2025, one of our—
Where are you?
Is Leah here somewhere? Where is she? It's really hard to see.
Are you up
Is
there?
she up there? She is. She's up top, right under a light.
You know something? Do me a favor. Wend your way down, because there has to be a photographer in this room, right? Is there?
Oh, there is. Yes, there's a photographer in the back.
Come on down at some point so we can take a picture together. All right?
Okay.
Come on down.
All right. So.
All right. I can barely see her.
I know. It is really hard.
So you got to come down so I can actually see you.
Leah Reddy of the class of 25 from Operations Research and Financial Engineering, a graduating senior. She wants to know, what were pivotal moments in your life path, such as mentors, experiences, and decisions that defined your journey? And I'll combine that, if it's okay, with a question from Jack Hasker.
Jack, where are you?
Is Jack also up top? Where is he? Oh, he's over there. The students are pointing. That's really helpful. Thank you. There he is. Okay.
Those lights are facing us, so I'm sorry. Jack, come on down. All right.
So Jack, who is also from the Operations Research and Financial Engineering Department, asks, was there a great decision or a big mistake that changed your life during your time at Princeton or shortly afterward?
Oh, okay. I wrote a book about this. And the book is really big. It's almost 300 pages. We would take the whole hour and longer for me to answer every part of that. So I think the entire course of my life changed when I came here. You have to start from what I knew, which was nothing about what Princeton was. With me today is the high school friend who got to Princeton a year before I did. And he was just explaining to another friend of mine how he got here. And the story is identical, except that he was asking the same questions of his debate coach at our high school. And basically he asked, what's Princeton? And the debate, I asked Ken this, and he gave me the same answer. It's an Ivy League school, so what's an Ivy League school? And the answer was, it's one of the best colleges in the country. Well, how can I afford that? And he said, they'll give you financial aid. Ken told me the same thing. He said, so how do I apply? They charge something like $50 to apply. They'll waive the fee. And Ken called me and gave me those answers to the identical questions he had asked his debate coach. And I asked him, and I said, okay, I'll apply. When I went to our guidance counselors in our high school, the guidance counselor said, those are nice places, but have you thought of a place like Fordham? She didn't really think that I belonged in a place like Princeton. Neither did the school nurse at our high school. When I got I don't know if you still do this, students apply, and they send you back a little card that says, likely to admitted, maybe, and maybe not.
I don't think so, no.
We got those little cards, okay?
Yeah.
And I got a likely to be admitted card. And, yeah, thank you. And, you know, I'm a diabetic, and he has my monitor, and he's telling me my sugars are low. At any rate, the school nurse called as I walked by one afternoon, looked at me and said, why did you get a likely and number 1 and number 2 in the school didn't? I didn't know how to answer her, and I didn't. I said, I don't know. Now I would know how to answer her, because number 1 and number 2 don't have full-time jobs on the weekend. And they didn't run for student president. And I did all of that and still got great grades. All right? But I didn't know enough to say that. So the life-altering moment was making the choice to come here at all. And it obviously opened the door for the rest of my life. I will tell you that I would interview often at law firms and in other jobs, and I would see my resume on people's desk in front of them. Princeton, Phi Beta Kappa, Yale, we're always circled. This place opens your doors forever. And I have taken full advantage of that, as I hope you will. There is privilege in being accepted here. And there is an element in life, in everything you do, of a little bit of luck, too. Don't ever think that we earn our spot here. When I was a trustee, I learned that there are something like 1,600 applications of students who have perfect SAT and perfect grammar averages in high school. Now, I didn't have that. Most of you, I suspect, didn't have that. It is that little bit of luck that comes into opportunities in life. What's not luck is what do you do with it when you walk through its doors? Do you take advantage of it? Do you make something happen with the gift you've been given? And so I guess the best decision I ever made in life was coming here. Meeting the mentors I did, the professors who helped me develop, meeting the classmates who are still friends. Many of them are traveling to today's events to be here with me. It was staying in touch with an institution, with people like your president, who have become friends. But Shirley Tigblum was a wonderful friend. Bill Bowen, who was president when I was here, was an equally wonderful friend and supporter throughout my career. I think he was at the Ford Foundation, wasn't he? He was one of the big foundations near the end of his...
I think.
It was Mellon.
Yeah.
But I stayed in touch with him throughout his life after Princeton.
Yeah.
And you should be in touch with all the people you meet here throughout your life. They will be supporters. Did I make a mistake at Princeton? That's an interesting question. I think I got from it as much as I knew I could then. In retrospect, I should have stayed in touch more with a lot more of my friends here. You sort of get tracked into life and you forget some of the people that you were in touch with. And I think that was a mistake. There are people who I didn't stay in enough touch with. There should always be time to stay in touch with the people you meet in your life's journey. And it becomes harder and harder as your world expands. But even with that, it's important to stay in touch with friends. They carry your memory with you. And so I would say that that's something you should be aware of as you travel the rest of your life.
Thank you for that, Justice.
Read my book. The rest of it.
I hope you heard that and read my book. Yeah. I know Leah and Jack have come down. I think what I would suggest, if this works, is that we continue to go through the questions, and then as we reach the end, I'll mention a few other students.
No, because they're going to want to go back. Yeah, they want to come and
okay, they're
go
coming
back
out
with
now.
their friends.
All right.
Come on.
This is all right. So Leah,
Go break it up.
Leah Reddy and Jack Hasker.
Hello. Thank you for the question.
No, thank you for being here.
All right. Where's that? Oh, she's been following me around today. You want me to move? So next time they ask you for questions, give them the questions. Thank you. Come on. Hello, Jack. How are you? Come. As I've aged, I've lost 4 inches. Thank you, Jack.
Okay.
All right.
Let me go to a couple of questions here around the Supreme Court.
Okay.
Let me start with this. You've been on the court now for more than 15 years. Can you say a bit about how you interact with the other justices? So, for example, there are stories about how Justice Ginsburg and Justice Scalia went to the opera together. Do you go out with the other justices? And should it matter to us whether or not you're doing things with the other justices?
Should it matter?
Well, you're skipping the first part, but
you
go
know,
ahead.
No. I'm trying. Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg had a common passion, which was the opera. And so that gave them an opportunity to socialize in a way that many of the other of us don't particularly have that as a central passion. Elena Kagan did a lot of opera with Ruth. I like dance, and none of my colleagues love dance. And so it's been very hard to get them interested. I also like jazz. That's the furthest thing from most opera lovers. And so I don't have many of my colleagues who like jazz. Imagine the one who does is Sam Alito. And it's not infrequent where I have showed up somewhere and been told that he was at a jazz thing the night before or at an earlier performance, okay? However, that doesn't mean I don't socialize with my colleagues. Every new colleague that comes to the court, I invite to my home for dinner. When I invited the 4 women, when I got to the Supreme Court, Justice O'Connor, Ginsburg, and Elena Kagan, Justice O'Connor said that I was the first woman justice who had ever cooked a meal for her. She was a great cook and often had her colleagues over. But my other sisters are not very good cooks, including my newest, Ketanji Jackson, which surprised me a little bit because she has a family, she has kids. Well, the rest, too, at least Justice Ginsburg did, but she wasn't, her husband cooked.
He was a good cook, actually, Marty.
I'm sorry, Marty was a great cook. Her husband was a fabulous cook. But I do, and I have been to the home of some of the others, and we do social, but we don't need to socialize that much because we see so much of each other. You have, as a judge, when you're a district court judge, you're in the courtroom by yourself. You see the other colleagues on the bench with you, but it's mostly just lunch, and it's not everybody, because everybody's sort of busy. So at least when I was on the Southern District of New York, there was a judge's lunchroom. But it was not more than about 10 of about 20 of us who ever got to a particular lunch during the week. On the Court of Appeals, you sit in panels of 3, and so you see those judges. But I was a group of 11, 12 circuit court judges, and there were another 10 senior judges, but we only sat in panels of 3. And so during the year, I would get maybe to sit with half of my court. You're on the Supreme Court, it's what's called a permanent en banc. Every single day that we're in an argument, we're sitting together. We have lunch after arguments. We have lunch on Fridays after our conferences. Now, not everybody shows up, but somewhere from 4 to 6 or 7 people show up at lunch. We have events at the court. We have barbecues. We have Christmas parties. We have historical society dinners. We have events all the time where we're socializing with the group that's there and with each other. And so there isn't that much of a need to see them outside of school. Occasionally is okay, but I'd rather be with my other friends, all right? And it's not, and I hope you're getting from this that it's not from a lack of exposure to each other. We have more than the norm for a judge's life. Should we care? Okay. I think we care enough to stay in touch with each other's lives through those lunches. We hear about their kids and what they're doing. We hear about what people are reading and what movies they've seen, because we talk about those things. So there is a very personal connection involved in our relationship with one another. And in many ways, we get to see the best in each other. You know, when my stepfather died, the first set of flowers I received in Florida, because that's where they lived, my mother and her husband, was from Clarence Thomas. We do reach out to each other in loss, or even in celebration. I'll get a note. I got a note. I'm not going to tell Chris. Well, I will tell you. Sam Alito and I and Elena were walking out of the robing room together, and Sam said, "You know, Elena, they're honoring her with a building." And he walked out and looked at her and said, "Do you think they'll ever do that for us?" And I didn't say, you weren't trustees, and you don't go back as often as I do. But putting that aside, my point is, yes, we do have personal relationships with one another. Not opera, but certainly a connection that only people who have to work day in and day out on every case together can have.
Yeah. So, Justice, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in the set of questions.
I talk a lot, so all your questions are not going to happen.
I just want to make sure that we get to some more of them that the students have submitted. So I'm going to move to one that comes from Dia Crable of the class of 25, another of our graduating seniors.
Where is she?
Let's see if we can find her. There she is, right there. She's nearby.
Go ahead, ask the question, and you can walk out as she's asking it. Come on.
So we're going to. Yeah, that's. She's a politics major and one of our class officers from the class of 2025. She wants to know what advice you have for young women wanting to pursue a career in the legal field and who hope to be a judge. And I would add more generally, what advice do you have for students considering careers in law?
All right, come. And then I'll answer the question.
Okay.
All right?
I'm going to stand aside.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Come. Thank you. Thank you. So, some of the smartest people I know are lawyers. And why do I think they're smart? Because they are among some of the best read people I know, and they are people who are curious about the world. That's what you need, curiosity, to be an effective lawyer. If you think about what lawyers do, they help the world with its problems. Every field, every relationship in the world comes to lawyers when they have difficulties. And so if you're going to be a good lawyer, you have to have enough curiosity to be able to have anyone with any kind of problem come to you. And you at least have the capacity to understand the problem. And the capacity and the wanting to learn about their problems so you can advise them in an effective way. It's the same skill you need as a judge. Before I became a judge, I had had very practice experience. I had been a criminal lawyer in state cases, but knew a lot about criminal law. I had been in private practice, and my practice was very wide. We represented an extraordinary range of clients in different fields and different work. And I did a little bit of corporate advising as well in my firm, because my clients were mostly European clients who didn't know much about American law or practice, and so I also advised them a lot. But I got to be a judge, and the number and variety of different areas of law that I was asked to manage was such that at the end of the first year on the bench, I gave a speech where I said, I finish every Friday night, and I go home with a head aching, not a headache. And I said, I know now why the brain is a muscle. Because I'm absorbing so much information with a fire hose of water down my throat that I can feel my muscle expanding. And some weeks it felt like it was going to burst with how much knowledge, new knowledge, I was taking in. If you are curious about the world and about people, about their nature and our relationships to one another, what makes us and the world tick, then you'll be a successful lawyer. And I think you'll be an even better judge. In the end, that curiosity, everybody should have. My brother, who's a doctor, often now in retrospect in his life says that he really misses the fact that he didn't have a Bachelor of Arts degree in college, that he was so tracked on being a doctor that he didn't really learn about the world. And he's doing some of that now in his older age. But I know what he means. I was privileged to have had that kind of background in college. To get into law school, you don't need to know law. They are so arrogant, most law schools, that they don't want you to come in with any knowledge about law. They believe they will teach you anything you need. Seriously, this is the Crystal. This is the attitude of law schools. He was in one, as a student and as a professor. So what they want to see is that you're successful in whatever major you undertake, that you can be a student leader, and that you have some passion about you, passion about being a leader, and about being a lawyer. And that means about doing something meaningful in your life. I think the advice I just gave you, I can tell you, probably would fit any area of life. If you can show any school that you really are interested in what you're doing, that you have a burning desire of some sort to make a difference in what you're doing, doesn't really matter what you choose. They'll see it. And that will get you to where you want to go. In the end, every job you undertake, even as a student today, and I tell this to students everywhere, don't make promises you can't keep, because people will remember. Every late paper you submit is going to make an impression on that professor, and not one that you necessarily want them to write in a letter. All right? Every student group that you're a part of, I can't tell you in my life how many calls I'll get to say, you know, you went to Princeton with X, you went to Yale with Y, you worked with someone in this job. What do you know about them? If it's something that wasn't positive, I try not to say anything. But if it's something that was the reverse. If it was something that was negative, I try not to say anything. But if it was positive, I will. And so the impressions you make in your life last forever. I tell students who became my interns when I was a judge, the worst thing you can do is promise to have a project at the end of the term and hand it back to me undone. I rather know that you'll come to me when I give you the assignment and say, Justice or Judge, then, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. I think this is more than a 2-week project. I had total respect for that. But walking away from something undone leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Those reputations stay with you. And so it's those things you need to watch, how you're building your reputation.
So this next question actually draws on queries that were submitted by 3 students. It's about the judicial role, and the questions are all about, in particular, the role of judicial review in a democracy. So Irene Diane of the class of 2027, who's a history major. Is Irene here? Where is she? She's up there. There she is. So Irene, she asks
somewhere. Come on down.
Yeah, she's going to come. Yeah, we're going to come down. You got time because I've got 2 more.
What show is that?
Pardon?
What show is that? Price was Right? I don't know.
Yeah, The Price is Right. We still watch Price is Right. Wow. Asks, what are your thoughts on the role of the judiciary today? Benjamin Midler, who's a graduate student in neuroscience. Is Benjamin here somewhere? Stand up. Where is he? Right here. Oh, you're ready. You're ready for your stage moment. Benjamin Midler asks how citizens should respond to decisions with which they disagree, And Daniel Alber, who's a graduate student in chemical and biological engineering. Where's Daniel? Yes, here? Oh, wait, over, yeah, there he is, all the way in back. Okay, the lights make it hard for us to pick you out, but come on down, please. He asks whether you would advise a new country to adopt the American model of judicial review or something else. So summing it up in a way, it's how do you think about the role of judges on a constitutional court?
Oh my gosh. All right.
But I'll let you figure out what parts of that. But we've got, here we go. So this is Irene. Irene Diane.
How are you? Fine, thank you. Declaration Day for you today.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just found this out. Thank you.
I'm so impressed that she did the Declaration Day thing because that wasn't a thing when the Justice
It
and I were
wasn't.
here.
I just learned about it today.
Yeah. So Benjamin Midler.
Hello, Benjamin. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Chris, I knew there was no neuroscience with Shirley.
Yeah.
When we were here, was there a neuroscience department?
No.
No. Okay. I thought so.
I think there was neuroscience, but not a neuroscience department.
Department, yeah.
And Daniel Alber
How are
in
you?
chemical and biological engineering.
Thank you. You got a lot of the smart kids here, too. Wow, I'm very impressed. Okay. Let me start with the last question.
Okay.
Justice Ginsburg was once asked whether she would recommend the American Constitution to any new countries that were being formed. And she said no. And people were a little taken aback by that. And she said, ours is a very old Constitution. And it doesn't quite work for everybody. She says there's a whole lot more modern constitutions and ways of doing things that might be better. And new countries should look at some of those. She pointed out in particular the South African Constitution, which was devised after they ended apartheid, with gathering some of the most forward-looking philosophers on law. The thing about the American Constitution, and with it the American structure of government, okay, is that we are not a rights-giving constitution or government. You think of the Bill of Rights, it's not really, it doesn't give you a right to speak. It says the government can't make any law respecting your right. But it's not an affirmative giving of rights. Most modern constitutions in other countries recognize education. We don't have a right to education in America. Some of your states might have a state constitutional right, but not all 50 states do. We don't have a right to public health of any kind. We don't have affirmative rights, and many countries do. Many countries, like Canada, for example, which is the foremost democracy, I think comparable to the United States, does have a belief in their judges being protectors of individual rights. We don't have that kind of looking at our structure of government. And because of that, it does leave a lot of pockets of discretion in our other branches of government, and with discretion comes the ability to constrict those rights. You're experiencing some of that now, aren't you? It's occurring, but that's why, because of the structure of our government. And so I'm not clear. I happen to, because I am a Supreme Court justice, I believe in our Constitution. I believe in our structure of government. I do everything necessary to uphold it and to uphold the rule of law as I understand it under that Constitution. But I can say that we're not the only ones who respect either the rule of law or individual rights. Other countries do, and we should be open to thinking about other ways of structuring ourselves as a nation, either as a nation or respecting that other nations have done it and done it in fairly effective ways, okay? So that answers the first question, or the third question, all right? The first question was, what do I believe the rule of law is? Let me start by talking about the tension that most of people have about law. Is most people come to law believing that law is black and white. You think law provides clear answers. That's what you want in your stomach. That's what you think law should do. Should treat everyone equally under the law. You don't want to hear that the law is gray. You don't want to hear it, but that's why you need lawyers and why you have judges. Because if the answers were so clear, you wouldn't need us, okay? The reason lawyers exist, the reason judges exist, is because all laws, or virtually all laws, are written in general terms. Start with our Constitution. Government can't do unreasonable search and seizures. What does the word unreasonable mean? Is it, as some of my colleagues believe, fixed in time to the founding? Is it something that has to take the principles of back then, like I believe, and try to figure out how they apply to new circumstances? So my friend Anthony Scalia believed that the Fourth Amendment only protected the physical intrusion by the government on your private property. So we had a very famous case, the Jones case, where the question was, could the police attach a GPS to the bottom of your car to trace your movements without a search warrant? He said no, because he believed that the police had violated your physical space by attaching the GPS. I joined his decision, but joined it in a concurrence, explaining that I think he was looking at privacy in too limited a way, given the development of technology. Because today, they don't need to attach that device to your car anymore. They can send sound waves to follow your car. And so for me, the question was not about, can the police attach something, but do you have a right of privacy? And what does that mean? That doesn't permit the police to intrude on you, even with new technology. And so those are different ways of looking at the Constitution, but they're going to lead to different answers. And that's why when you're speaking about the rule of law, it's a concept. It is not a defined answer to anything, because that answer gets developed from case to case, from situation to situation as judges decide those situations, and as the court reads its precedents and decides new issues. Now, that is why, what do you do when you disagree with a court's decision? The second question, okay? Let's start with the following. Don't tell me you disagree with anything until you've told me you've read the decision, the court's decision, from cover to cover. Has everyone in this room read even one Supreme Court decision from beginning to end? How many of you can raise your hand? You see how few hands are raised? I asked that question in a room full of lawyers, and not every hand goes up. Okay? Most of us citizens react to sound bites. We react to bottom lines. We don't pay attention to the reasoning. We don't just become informed enough citizens to look at how the majority, the concurrences, the dissents. For those of you who don't know what a concurrence is, I agree with the outcome the majority reached, but I think there's a different way of thinking about it. A dissent says, I don't agree with what those guys are saying at all. At any rate, there's a different way to approach every problem. And so when you say you're disagreeing with a court ruling, please make sure that you can articulate what in the court's approach you're objecting to. Because it can't be the bottom line. I don't decide a case by saying, is this the right outcome? If that's where I started, then I'm not an impartial judge. I'm given a legal problem. I bring to it all the legal tools I've been taught about interpretation, both of the Constitution and statutes. And I order the tools that I'm using to interpret that on the unique circumstance of each case. But I'm coming to a conclusion based on these tools that I'm using to interpret something. And so, for me, I don't control every outcome of every case that comes before me. There are people who will say, probably in this audience, that I'm opposed to the death penalty. You will never see a writing from me saying that, ever. I do write on many death penalty cases that I don't believe should have been upheld by the court, not because I have a personal belief that I'm opposed to the death penalty. Whether I had one or not, it's irrelevant. There are dozens of cases every year where I vote against overturning a death penalty judgment because there's no legal ground to overturn it. I only write in a death penalty case if I think that fair process hasn't been given. It's a very different thing. I can't control outcomes. My personal views, your personal views, shouldn't control outcomes. To the extent that you think personally that a law is wrong, you have an obligation as a citizen to try to change that law. Laws are made by people. People change laws. Voting changes laws. It requires effort. If there's a law you don't like, it's there because a group of people wanted that law and worked hard at getting it passed. If you don't like it, you have to band together and work at getting it overthrown. If you don't like a court decision, that's a little bit harder. All right? But you still can get Congress to change laws. And so it is a long game. It's not a short-term thing. It is an investment of time and energy and passion to get our American experiment right. Right now, we're in a tumultuous state, and one that's going to require a great effort from us as a nation to figure out what path we're going down. And is it the path that we want as a collective? But it will take everyone's active participation in that dialogue and in those acts for us to ensure that the rule of law is ultimately respected. What does the rule of law mean to me? It means that we are a nation that is governed by laws, that we do expect our leaders to follow those laws, that we expect our judges, whether they agree or don't, will follow the law, and that citizens will respect our function in it, which is to do what the law requires and to insist that our citizens participate enough to make sure they are good laws. And that's not to say that there aren't some bad laws out there. As one of my favorite people, who is Rosie Abella. Rosie was a Canadian Supreme Court Justice. She's now retired. Do you know Rosie?
I know of her. I don't think I've met her.
You really should invite her to speak here, okay? No, seriously. Yeah. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the Rosie Abella of Canada. Rosie was leading the women's rights movement in Canada long before Ruth Bader Ginsburg was. And I love Ruth. But Rosie is a real icon up there. If any of you have subscriptions to PBS, go look for a documentary about her life. It's called Unprecedented. But what she once said is, not all laws are good. Segregation was an American law. Apartheid was a South African law. All right? Slavery was an American law. Those are not necessarily good laws. What we needed was judges who, after Brown, who, even though they had grown up in the South and grown up in a culture where segregation was their cultural identity, their bigger identity as judges was to the rule of law. And when the Supreme Court said the 14th Amendment could not tolerate segregation, those judges, despite threats to their lives, crosses burning on their lawns, threats to their children and wives, being ostracized from their friendships, many of those judges, their fraternities, kicked them out because of the rulings they were making, desegregating schools. Those are the kinds of people that I had as role models when I entered the legal profession, and they're the kinds of people with courage that I continue to follow or try to follow. But my point is that respect for the rule of law is recognizing that it is not just agreement or disagreement, it is a process that requires all of our active participation.
So Justice Sotomayor, we're coming toward the end now of what has been a wonderful hour with you. I want to close with one more student question. This is coming from Amelia Freund of the great class of 2028, who's a first year. Is Amelia here somewhere? I hope. Yes? No? Where's Amelia?
No, where is she?
She's also up top. Okay, Amelia, come on down here. We're going to...
I don't know what you did, Chris.
We're putting all the questioners up top.
Yeah, well, except for one.
Except for one. We got a couple here.
Yeah.
But Amelia, who is a prospective politics major, asks, what do you wish you knew when you were our age? So we'll give you a moment to think about it, because I think that we got...
I can answer
Okay,
that.
we'll get Amelia's picture in a moment.
When she comes down.
Okay.
I wish I knew that I didn't have so much anxiety over every decision I was making. Do you know how much I struggled to figure out what I was going to major in? How much I struggled to... Well, I didn't really struggle that much to come to Princeton because I didn't know enough to struggle. But I did struggle when I was here. And then where was I going to law school? And was I going to take this job or that job? What was I going to do next? And it was a constant sort of anxiety. Every decision became like life-altering. There really isn't anything that's life-altering. Whether I had come to Princeton or not, wherever I had gone, I would have made a meaningful life for myself. Coming here made it a little easier, okay? But there's nothing you can do that's fatal except decide to commit a crime. This is serious. If you pick a major you don't like, you can switch. All right, it might cost you a little bit of money, but it's not deadly. Money and a little bit more of it doesn't kill you. If you take a job you don't like, you stick it out for a little respectable amount of time, and then you move and do something else. You can transfer if you're in a place you don't like, if you're in a college or a graduate school or whatever choice you made. Investigate, think about your options, weigh the pros and cons, talk to people, make the best decision you can, and then don't have those sleepless nights. I really wish I had done less of those. A lot of wasted energy. Enjoy the choice process enough to say, did everything I could, now I'm just going to go and do it. There is something to be said about suffering less. So I wish you all the joy of having a student life that's not marred constantly with anxiety.
That is a wonderful place to close. Justice, and here's Amelia. You can get you up front.
Thank you. Freshman. I was such a silly freshman. I was so scared of being here. I never would have gone to a public lecture. You're braver than I am. Thanks.
Thank you, Justice. And please join me, Tigers, Sonia Sotomayor. Wonderful. That was just fabulous. So memorable.